What happens when a prince walks onto a late-night show thinking he's untouchable? In just 47 seconds, Prince Harry went from smiling guest to furious storm-out after Stephen Colbert called him out live on air. A fiery argument erupted that left the audience gasping, cameras shaking, and one royal reputation in absolute tatters. Before we dive into this explosive confrontation, make sure you subscribe to this channel for daily videos exposing the royal family's darkest scandals. Hit that notification bell because you won't want to miss what we uncover next. Last night's episode of The Late Show started like any other celebrity appearance. Prince Harry walked out to applause, waving to the crowd with that familiar grin plastered across his face. He settled into the guest chair across from Stephen Colbert, clearly expecting the usual softball questions about his charity work and life in California. The audience cheered. The lights were bright. Everything seemed perfectly normal. But Stephen Colbert had other plans. "Prince Harry, welcome to the show," Colbert began, his tone friendly but with an edge that regular viewers would recognize. "You've been making quite a few headlines lately." Harry nodded, still smiling. "That's one way to put it, Stephen. Though I'd say the media makes more headlines about me than I actually make myself." Right, Colbert replied, leaning back in his chair. "The media. Always the media's fault. Speaking of which, you've done, what, about 17 interviews in the past year? A Netflix series, a book, multiple podcast appearances, and now you're here. For someone who wants privacy, you're everywhere." The audience laughed nervously. Harry's smile tightened just slightly. "Well, Stephen, there's a difference between wanting privacy in your personal life and using your platform to speak truth," Harry said, his voice carrying that practiced tone he'd perfected over dozens of interviews. "Truth," Colbert repeated, nodding slowly. "Your truth. That's the phrase you like to use, isn't it? Your truth. Not the truth, but your truth." "Everyone has their own perspective," Harry responded, shifting in his seat. "My family has their version of events, and I have mine." Colbert leaned forward, resting his elbows on his desk. "But here's what I'm curious about, Harry. Can I call you Harry? Or should I stick with Prince Harry?" "Harry's fine." "Great. So Harry, you've spent years now talking about how terrible your family is, how racist the institution is, how trapped you felt, how awful the British press treated you and your wife. And look, I get it. The British tabloids can be brutal. No one's denying that." Harry nodded, seemingly relieved that Colbert was acknowledging his perspective. But Colbert wasn't finished. "However," he continued, his voice sharpening, "you're a multi-millionaire who grew up in literal palaces. You had the best education money could buy. You've never had to worry about paying rent, buying groceries, or whether you could afford health care. And now you're living in a $16 million mansion in Montecito, signing deals worth hundreds of millions of dollars, all while complaining about how hard your life has been." The audience went completely silent. Harry's face flushed. "That's not fair," Harry said, his voice rising slightly. "Money doesn't protect you from emotional pain. Money doesn't stop racism. Money doesn't bring back my mother or heal the trauma I experienced." "You're absolutely right," Colbert agreed. "And I'm not dismissing your pain or your trauma. Losing your mother the way you did was horrific, and I can't imagine what that was like. But Harry, millions of people deal with trauma every single day. They lose parents, they face discrimination, they struggle with mental health, and they don't have the resources you have. They can't afford therapy. They can't move to California and start fresh. They can't write a book and make $40 million talking about their problems." Harry's jaw clenched. "So what, I should just shut up? I should just accept the way I was treated because I have money? That's ridiculous." "I'm not saying you should shut up," Colbert replied calmly. "I'm saying maybe, just maybe, you should consider how it looks. You're sitting here in your designer clothes talking about oppression and suffering, while real people out there are actually oppressed and actually suffering, and they don't get Netflix deals. They don't get Oprah interviews. They just have to live with it." The tension in the studio was thick enough to cut with a knife. Harry sat forward in his chair, his face red, his hands gripping the armrests. "You don't know what it's like," Harry said, his voice trembling with anger. "You don't know what it's like to have your every move scrutinized, to have people lie about you constantly, to have your own family brief against you to the press." "You're right, I don't," Colbert said. But I do know what it's like to work for a living. I know what it's like to earn what I have. And I'm willing to bet most of this audience knows that too. The audience applauded. It started as a few claps, then grew louder until it filled the entire studio. Harry looked around, his expression a mixture of shock and fury. "This is unbelievable," Harry muttered, though his microphone picked it up clearly. "What's unbelievable?" Colbert asked, his eyebrows raised. This ambush. I came here expecting a respectful conversation, and instead, you're attacking me." "I'm not attacking you, Harry. I'm asking you questions. If you can't handle questions, maybe you shouldn't be doing interviews." That was the spark that lit the fuse. Harry stood up slightly, then sat back down, clearly conflicted about whether to stay or go. "You know what? This is exactly the kind of crap I dealt with in the UK. Everyone thinks they know my story. Everyone thinks they have the right to judge me." "No one's judging you for leaving the royal family," Colbert said, his voice remaining steady. "If you weren't happy, you had every right to leave. What people are judging you for is the way you've handled it since. The constant interviews, the constant complaining, the constant cashing in on your family drama while simultaneously demanding privacy." "Cashing in?" Harry's voice was loud now, echoing through the studio. "You think this is about money? I'm trying to make a difference. I'm trying to change things." "By doing what exactly?" Colbert challenged. "By talking? Because that seems to be all you do. Talk, talk, talk. You talk about mental health while publicly trashing your family's mental health. You talk about privacy while sharing intimate details about your life in a book. You talk about protecting your wife while putting her in the spotlight constantly. It's all talk, Harry." The audience was completely silent now, watching this confrontation unfold like a car crash they couldn't look away from. Harry stood up, his chest heaving. "I don't have to sit here and listen to this." "You're right. You don't," Colbert said, not backing down an inch. "You can walk out, but that's what you do, isn't it? When things get tough, when people ask real questions, you walk away. You walked away from your family. You walked away from your country. And now you'll walk away from this conversation." "That's bullshit," Harry shouted, and the audience gasped. "I didn't walk away. I was driven out. They made it impossible for me to stay." "Who's they, Harry? Your grandmother who just died? Your father who's dealing with cancer? Your brother who you've publicly humiliated? Who exactly made it impossible?" Harry's hands were shaking. "You don't understand the whole story." "Then tell me." Colbert's voice rose to match Harry's volume. "Tell me something new. Tell me something that isn't just another complaint about how hard it was to be a prince. Give me something real." "Fine. You want real?" Harry's voice cracked. "Every single day of my life I was compared to my brother. Every single day. I was told I wasn't good enough. I wasn't smart enough. I wasn't important enough. My entire existence was to be the spare, the backup, the one who didn't matter. And when I finally found someone who loved me for me, when I finally found happiness, they destroyed it. They leaked stories. They made up lies. They turned the whole country against my wife." Colbert's expression softened slightly, but his voice remained firm. "And I'm sorry that happened. Genuinely. But Harry, you're doing the exact same thing now. You're leaking stories about them. You're making their lives difficult. You're turning people against them. Don't you see? You've become the thing you claim to hate." Harry froze. For a moment, he just stood there, staring at Colbert with an expression of pure fury mixed with something else, something like recognition. But the fury won out. "How dare you?" Harry said quietly, his voice deadly. "How dare you sit there and compare me to them? I'm nothing like them." "Aren't you, though?" Colbert pressed. "You're using the media to control your narrative just like they do. You're protecting your image just like they do. You're making money off your royal status just like they do. The only difference is you're pretending you're not." "I'm not pretending anything," Harry shouted again. "I'm being honest. I'm being real. Something my family could never be." "You're being selective," Colbert countered. "You share what makes you look good and what makes them look bad. That's not honesty, Harry. That's public relations. And you're really, really good at it." The audience started murmuring among themselves. Some seemed to agree with Colbert. Others looked uncomfortable with how heated things had become. Harry took a step back from his chair, his whole body language screaming that he was done. "You invited me here to humiliate me," Harry said, his voice shaking. That was the whole point of this, wasn't it? Get Prince Harry on the show and tear him apart for ratings. No, Colbert said simply. I invited you here to have an actual conversation, not a puff piece. Not another platform for you to repeat the same talking points you've been saying for 3 years. An actual conversation where someone pushes back on the narrative you've been selling. I'm not selling anything. You literally wrote a book called Spare and sold it for millions of dollars, Harry. Come on. That was it. That was the breaking point. Harry ripped off his microphone, the wire snapping as he yanked it from his collar. I'm done. This is done. You can take your show and shove it. Harry, wait. Colbert started. But Harry was already moving. No, I'm not waiting. I'm not sitting here while you disrespect me and everything I've been through. The audience was completely frozen now, unsure whether to react or stay silent. Colbert stood up from behind his desk. Harry, if you can dish it out to your family on every platform available, you should be able to take some questions about it. Harry spun around, pointing at Colbert. That's different. They had power over me my entire life. They controlled everything. I'm finally free to speak my truth, and people like you want to silence me. Nobody's silencing you. Colbert's voice boomed across the studio. You have more platforms than almost anyone on the planet. You're not being silenced, you're being questioned. There's a huge difference. Not to me there isn't, Harry shot back. For a long moment, they just stared at each other across the stage. The cameras continued rolling, capturing every second of this unprecedented confrontation. Then Harry shook his head, a bitter laugh escaping his lips. You know what the worst part is? I actually thought Americans were different. I thought you guys would understand. But you're just like them. You're just like the British press. You build people up just to tear them down. That's not what this is, Colbert said, his voice quieter now but still firm. This is accountability, Harry. Something you seem to think only applies to everyone else. Screw your accountability, Harry spat. And screw this show. With that, Prince Harry turned on his heel and marched toward the exit. The audience didn't know whether to applaud or stay silent, so they did something in between, a confused smattering of noise that filled the awkward space. Harry! Colbert called out one more time. This is live television. You can't just walk off. But Harry didn't stop. He didn't turn around. He didn't acknowledge Colbert at all. Well then, get the hell off my stage, Colbert shouted after him, his own frustration finally breaking through his professional demeanor. Harry threw up a middle finger without looking back, pushing through the backstage curtain and disappearing from view. The sound of a door slamming echoed through the studio moments later. The audience erupted. Some people gasped, some laughed nervously, some applauded Colbert, and some sat in stunned silence. Colbert stood on his stage, running his hand through his hair, staring at the spot where Harry had exited. His chest was rising and falling rapidly, the adrenaline of the confrontation still coursing through him. Well, Colbert said, turning back to face the audience and the cameras. That just happened. More nervous laughter rippled through the crowd. Ladies and gentlemen, that was supposed to be a 15-minute interview segment, Colbert continued, trying to regain his composure. Instead, you just witnessed a prince throw a tantrum on live television because someone finally asked him tough questions. The audience's applause grew louder. They were on Colbert's side. That much was clear. I want to be clear about something, Colbert said, holding up his hands. I have nothing against Prince Harry personally. I have nothing against him leaving the royal family if that's what he needed to do for his mental health and happiness. What I have a problem with is the hypocrisy, the double standards, the constant playing of the victim card while living a life of extraordinary privilege. More applause. You can't spend years trashing your family in public, making millions of dollars off that family drama, and then act shocked when someone points out what you're doing. You just can't. And if you're going to come on my show, you're going to get real questions. Not softballs. Real questions. A producer appeared from the side of the stage, whispering something in Colbert's ear. He nodded, then turned back to the audience. Apparently, Prince Harry has already left the building, Colbert announced. His security team rushed him out a side exit. So I guess that's that. The audience continued to buzz with energy. This was going to be all anyone talked about tomorrow. You know what? Colbert said, a slight smile finally crossing his face. I think we all learned something important tonight. You can take the prince out of the palace, but apparently you can't take the entitlement out of the prince. That got the biggest laugh and applause of the night. Colbert looked directly into the camera, his expression serious again. Prince Harry, if you're watching this back at your mansion in Montecito, I want you to know something. The problem isn't that people are asking you questions. The problem is that you don't like the questions they're asking. And that's on you, not on us. He paused, letting those words sink in. You spent your entire royal life complaining about media intrusion and lack of freedom. Now, you have all the freedom in the world, and you're spending it doing more media than ever before. You're writing books about your family, doing documentaries about your family, giving interviews about your family. At some point, you have to ask yourself, if you're so desperate to move on from that life, why can't you stop talking about it? The studio was hanging on his every word now. And here's the thing that really gets me, Colbert continued, his voice rising with passion. There are real issues in this world, real problems. Climate change, poverty, inequality, war, disease. But we're all supposed to sit around and feel sorry for a guy who grew up in a castle because his family wasn't nice enough to him? Come on! The audience roared their approval. I mean, yes, family dysfunction is real. Yes, mental health struggles are real. Yes, racism is real and serious and needs to be addressed. But Harry, buddy, you're not the spokesperson for any of those causes that you think you are. You're a rich guy who had a falling out with his rich family. That's it. That's the story. Colbert walked to the edge of the stage, closer to the audience. And before anyone comes at me on Twitter or whatever it's called now, I'm not saying Harry's pain isn't valid. I'm not saying he didn't experience real hurt. I'm saying that his response to that hurt to monetize it, to weaponize it, to turn it into a multi-million-dollar media empire, while claiming he just wants privacy, that's what I have a problem with. He pointed back toward where Harry had stormed off. That man just walked off my stage because I challenged his narrative. Think about that. A grown man, a prince, couldn't handle being questioned, couldn't handle someone not immediately agreeing with his version of events. What does that tell you? Everything. Someone in the audience shouted, and Colbert nodded. Exactly. It tells you everything you need to know. A stage manager was signaling frantically that they needed to go to commercial, but Colbert held up one finger, asking for just another moment. One last thing, he said, his voice softer now but still intense. To anyone out there who's dealing with real family trauma, real mental health issues, real struggles with racism or discrimination, or any of the serious things Harry claims to care about, you are not alone. Your pain is valid. Your experiences matter. But please, please don't look to Prince Harry as your champion. Because a real champion doesn't walk away when things get tough. A real champion doesn't throw a fit when challenged. And a real champion doesn't profit off their pain while ignoring everyone else's. The applause was deafening now. People were on their feet, cheering, whistling. Colbert finally smiled, a real smile this time, and gave a small bow. We're going to take a break, he announced. When we come back, I have no idea what we're going to do, because our guests just quit on live television. But stick around anyway. This is The Late Show. I'm Stephen Colbert. And apparently, I'm now the guy who made a prince storm off. Not sure if that's going on my resume or not. As the show cut to commercial, the cameras caught one final image. Colbert standing alone on his stage, shaking his head with a mixture of disbelief and satisfaction, while the audience continued to cheer and the empty guest chair sat abandoned under the bright studio lights, a perfect symbol of a prince who couldn't handle the heat and ran away from yet another confrontation.